Before I start, I'd like to clarify a couple of things that have been addressed in today's hearing, and I'll be brief, Mr. Secretary. The fact that immigration laws haven't been updated doesn't mean we don't get to follow the immigration laws on the books. And I would agree with you. We desperately need some update to our immigration laws. Those don't occur in this committee. That actually happens over in judiciary. I appreciate the continual mention that needs to be addressed, but it doesn't obfuscate or even allow a variance of any kind in laws that have already been passed by the body. It doesn't excuse violation of the law. I'd also like to clarify something that is, and quite frankly, I think dishonest, at least disingenuous, to suggest that because someone or a group of this side of the aisle or that side of the aisle, votes one way or another on a budget, that you're not for, spending money to increase border security. For example, if you vote against a budget that decreases Customs and Border Patrol, and then you turn around and vote for a budget that increases dollars for Customs and Border Patrol, it is dishonest to say that side who voted that way voted to cut spending to Customs and Border Patrol. Yet we've heard that multiple times today. That's just flat dishonesty. If that's all you got to say to support or defend the actions at the southern border, well, I guess that tells everybody the truth about what's really going on. Another point I'd like to clarify. Someone made a comment that impeachment hearings earlier were 2 hearings. It was a 10-month, 5-phased investigation of oversight with subpoenas that were never complied with, by the way. This notion that there were 2 hearings is just false. And about legislation on addressing border security, the process is pretty simple in the Constitution and the rules of the committee and the House and the Senate. We passed a bill, we sent it to the Senate, they could amend it. We go to conference committee, we do that every year on the NDAA. If the leadership of the Senate really wanted to do something, they would have picked that bill up that was sent over a year ago. In terms of, the budget discussion today and AI and all this other stuff, multiple members talked about this stuff. I want to make sure I clarify because, you just don't get to say, this happened in some kind of Jedi mind trick and tell the American people that the people here on this side of the aisle didn't talk about AI. Ms. Lee talked about AI, about human trafficking. Mr. Garbarino talked about AI, cybersecurity. I mean, it's just somewhat infuriating that people just think they can say something that's not true and everybody's going to believe it. So I want to correct the record on that. I have to be candid. Your 2025 budget request, I think, undermines our country's ability to handle national security. I think this idea of cutting Customs and Border Patrol, creating some slush fund that you guys get to decide on your own how to use, is really contrary to the whole founding principles of us doing a budget here, sending it to you guys, y'all execute that budget. That was what our founders envisioned. So creating slush funds, it's against the whole foundation of the Constitution. And so that's why things like that aren't supported in this budget, other budgets that do get voted on and authorizations. Underfunding Customs and Border Protection facilities, I think it's just going to result in an increased flow of migrants across the border. When we catch and release and do those kinds of things, it's a motivation. People come because it's an incentive to come. And that's why it's important for us not to see cuts to those. And we know a lot of the dollars in this slush fund are going to do nothing but continue the policies that you've been doing, which is just ushering more people in. I think the interesting number to me, if you look at the curve on known gotaways, as you pull people off the border to process, the known gotaways number actually flatlines or decreases a little bit because they're not out there to see the known gotaways, right? So they don't see them because they're not out on the border. They're actually processing people. So I think that unknown number just increases massively. But that's speculation on my part. But it's good common sense. And that's a number we have no clue how big that number is. But we brought it in this committee many times and have shown the videos, from ranchers where Folks are wearing camouflage. You've seen the carpet shoes, I'm sure, Mr. Secretary, that have been piled up in Arizona, just inside the border, and the backpacks, which we know are full of fentanyl. During your tenure as Secretary, a record number of illegal aliens have crossed into the country, many of whom have connections to transnational criminal organizations. You're from California originally. The very good reporting on how the Honduran cartels have linked up the gangs in San Francisco and created this nexus is shocking. It's all happened on your watch. Most recently, of course, and it's been mentioned here, an illegal alien murdered a college student, Laken Riley, paroled by your department into the country and left a trail of crime in his path. She's just one of thousands of Americans that have been murdered or otherwise victimized by illegal immigrants. The most gut-wrenching part of her murder is that it could have been prevented if you and your administration had chosen to enforce the laws on the books. But that young woman's dead, simply because the laws weren't followed. Mr. Secretary, the number of known gotaways I've talked about already, that number's trailed off because we're not out on the border looking anymore. I don't want to imagine that undetected number. It just scares me to death. It seemed to scare Mr. Ray, or Director Ray. He talked about that when he was here testifying. You claim that your budget will address the issues we face at our border, but if we look at the numbers, the math doesn't add up to me. FY25, DHS seeks to hire only 350 new Border Patrol agents. I don't think that number is enough, and that's why in all the authorizations we've sent over, it's been significantly higher than that, despite what's been said here today by others who like to misrepresent what really happened. When you testified in the Senate and Senator Capito asked you how you will reach your hiring goals, you couldn't give a sizable answer. The truth is, Mr. Secretary, morale at DHS is at an all-time low because of the working conditions, and these are your policies that have created that. We've been committed to providing strong oversight to the department, and most importantly, the actions that you've taken as a leader. We've investigated those policies, we've investigated those failures. We look forward and we hope that we can work together on those issues that I mentioned at the beginning: cybersecurity, ports, vulnerability of our supply chain. I think a lot of those areas we do agree on. And where there is overlap, where we do agree, we're going to move those things forward as quickly as we can. So I'll look forward to doing that with you and your team. This committee is focused on strengthening our cyber workforce, and I've got a bill that I personally am leading and helping put together. We'll get a copy of it to Director Easterly and make sure she gets eyes on it, and others from your department. We'll want your help on that, and I think you'll like the bill that we're putting together. That really ends my comments for the day, and again, I thank you for coming. I understand the emotions of being here today, and without objection, the committee does stand in adjourn.